May 19th, 1536. The Tower of London. As the first rays of dawn pierce through the morning mist, a young woman kneels on a wooden scaffold. She is 35 years old. She wears a gray damask gown trimmed with fur, her dark hair hidden beneath a white coif. Around her neck, soon to meet the executioner's sword, hangs the destiny of England itself. Her name is Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, mother to the future Elizabeth I, and condemned traitor. But how did a merchant's granddaughter rise to become the most powerful woman in England, only to fall so catastrophically? This is the story of a love affair that shattered a kingdom, defied the Pope, and changed the course of history forever. Our story begins not in England, but in France. The year is 1514. A young Anne Boleyn, barely 13, arrives at the most sophisticated court in Europe as a maid of honor to Queen Claude. Unlike most English girls of her station, Anne is being groomed for something extraordinary. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, is an ambitious diplomat who understands that knowledge is power. In France, Anne learns to speak French fluently. She studies music, dance, poetry, and the art of courtly conversation. But most importantly, she learns the game of courtly love, that dangerous dance between desire and propriety that ruled the courts of Europe. She watches, she learns, and she understands that charm and wit can be more powerful than beauty alone. In 1522, Anne returns to England, transformed. She is no longer a girl, but a sophisticated young woman of 21. She joins the court of Queen Catherine of Aragon, and it is here that her fate becomes entangled with the most powerful man in England, King Henry VIII. But let us be clear. Henry VIII in 1522 is not yet the bloated tyrant of popular imagination. He is 31 years old, over 6 feet tall, athletic, musical, and considered one of the most handsome princes in Christendom. He writes poetry. He composes music. He jousts with legendary skill. And he is desperately, miserably married. Catherine of Aragon has been Henry's wife for 13 years. She was once his brother's widow, requiring a papal dispensation for their marriage. She has given Henry one surviving child, a daughter, Mary, but no son, no male heir. And in the brutal mathematics of Tudor succession, this is a catastrophic failure. Henry has had mistresses before. This is expected, even accepted. His affair with Mary Boleyn, Anne's own sister, was common knowledge. But when the king's eye falls upon Anne Boleyn sometime around 1525 or 1526, something different happens. Anne does not fall into his bed. She does not accept gifts, titles, or the role of royal mistress. Instead, she does something revolutionary. She says no. Henry is fascinated, then obsessed. He writes her love letters. 17 survive to this day, held in the Vatican Library. In them, we see a king reduced to a pleading suitor. "I beg to know expressly your intention touching the love between us," he writes. Anne's responses are calculated, tantalizing, always just out of reach. She will not be a mistress. She will be queen, or she will be nothing. And so begins what history calls the king's great matter. Henry decides he must annul his marriage to Catherine. His reasoning? The biblical prohibition against marrying your brother's widow found in Leviticus. Never mind that he'd needed papal permission for this very marriage. Now, he claims, his conscience troubles him. God is punishing him with the lack of a male heir. Henry's chief minister, Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, is tasked with securing the annulment from Pope Clement VII. It should be straightforward. Popes have granted annulments before. But there is a problem, a catastrophic problem. In 1527, Rome is sacked by the armies of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, and Charles V is Catherine of Aragon's nephew. Years pass. The Pope delays, equivocates, stalls. Wolsey fails to deliver. Anne waits, no longer young, her reputation in tatters, unable to marry anyone else, suspended in agonizing limbo. She is mocked as the king's whore, though she has never shared his bed. Her family faces scandal, and still the annulment does not come. In 1529, Wolsey fails for the last time. The Pope rules against Henry. Wolsey is stripped of his offices, his palaces seized. He dies in disgrace the following year, allegedly saying on his deathbed, "If I had served God as diligently as I have done the king, he would not have given me over in my gray hairs." Into Wolsey's place steps a brilliant and ruthless lawyer named Thomas Cromwell. And Cromwell proposes something radical, something unprecedented, something that will tear England away from 1,000 years of Catholic tradition. If the Pope won't grant the annulment, he suggests, then England should break from Rome entirely. Henry should declare himself supreme head of the Church in England. It is a revolutionary proposal. It means defying the Pope, risking excommunication, possibly invasion. It means religious upheaval across the realm. But it offers Henry what he desperately wants: the power to marry Anne Boleyn. On January 25, 1533, Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII are secretly married. The ceremony takes place before dawn, in a chamber at Whitehall Palace, with perhaps 5 people present. It is intimate, clandestine, and entirely illegal. Henry is still married to Catherine in the eyes of the Church. But more significant, Anne is already pregnant. This pregnancy is everything. After 7 years of waiting, Anne has finally surrendered to Henry's advances, gambling that this child will be the male heir England desperately needs. If she delivers a healthy prince, her position is secure. If not, she has sacrificed everything for nothing. On June 1, 1533, Anne Boleyn is crowned Queen of England in Westminster Abbey. It is a coronation of unprecedented magnificence. She processes through London in cloth of gold and ermine, her dark hair flowing loose down her back in the style reserved for virgin queens, a pointed statement given her visible pregnancy. The crown placed on her head is St. Edward's crown, usually reserved for monarchs themselves. But the crowds are strangely quiet. Many in England remain loyal to Catherine, whom they see as the true queen. They call Anne the concubine, and worse. There are reports of women shouting abuse, of merchants refusing to decorate their shops. Anne has risen higher than any common-born woman in English history, but she has also made powerful enemies. September 7, 1533. Anne goes into labor at Greenwich Palace. Henry waits anxiously. Astrologers have predicted a son. Tournaments are planned. Announcements drafted. The child arrives healthy and strong, but it is a girl. They name her Elizabeth. Before we continue with Anne's tragic downfall, if you're finding this story as captivating as we do, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Echoes of Hidden Tales. Share this with anyone who loves history's most compelling true stories. Your support helps us bring these hidden tales to light. Now let's return to the palace, where Anne Boleyn's position is already beginning to crumble. The birth of Elizabeth is a disaster for Anne. Henry's disappointment is palpable. The elaborate jousts are cancelled. The celebrations muted. And though Henry declares himself pleased with his fair daughter, everyone knows the truth. Anne has failed in her primary duty. Anne's situation becomes increasingly precarious. She suffers a miscarriage in the summer of 1534. Henry begins flirting with other women at court. Anne responds with the only weapons she has, her sharp wit and sharper tongue. She argues with Henry, criticizes his policies, involves herself in religious reform. She is everything Catherine never was: outspoken, passionate, intellectual. And Henry begins to find these qualities less enchanting than exhausting. By 1535, Henry's eye has fallen on a new woman, Jane Seymour. Jane is everything Anne is not: pale, blonde, quiet, submissive. She has learned from Anne's example. When Henry offers her gifts, she refuses them, saying she cannot accept presents from a married man. The pattern is repeating, but this time, Anne is Catherine. On January 7th, 1536, Catherine of Aragon dies at Kimbolton Castle. Some say of a broken heart. The autopsy reveals a black growth on her heart, possibly cancer. Anne, perhaps unwisely, celebrates openly. She wears yellow, the color of mourning in Spain, but of celebration in England. She does not yet understand that Catherine's death has sealed her own fate. On January 24th, 1536, disaster strikes. Henry, competing in the lists at Greenwich, is thrown from his horse. The animal, armored and weighing over 1,000 pounds, falls on top of him. For 2 hours, the king lies unconscious. The court holds its breath. If Henry dies, England faces chaos: a female infant as heir and a kingdom torn between religious factions. Anne, pregnant again, is told of the accident. The shock is enormous. 5 days later, on January 29th, the very day of Catherine of Aragon's funeral, Anne miscarries. The child is a boy, approximately 15 weeks developed, Henry's long-desired son, lost. Henry visits Anne briefly after the miscarriage. His words are chilling. "I see that God will not give me male children." He tells her that when she recovers, he will speak with her. The meaning is clear. Their marriage is over. Anne tries to explain the miscarriage, blaming the shock of his accident, her fear for his life. But Henry is done listening. Thomas Cromwell, who once supported Anne, now sees her as an obstacle. She has made enemies of him through her support for religious reforms he opposes and her interference in foreign policy. More critically, she has failed to produce a male heir. And Cromwell understands what Henry wants before Henry himself admits it: a new wife. Cromwell's plan is elegant and brutal. He will not simply remove Anne through another annulment. That would make Elizabeth a bastard and suggest Henry's judgment was flawed. Instead, he will destroy her completely, making Henry the victim of a treacherous wife. On April 30th, 1536, a court musician named Mark Smeaton is arrested. After interrogation, possibly torture, he confesses to adultery with the Queen. Over the next days, arrests multiply like a contagion. Sir Henry Norris, groom of the stool, one of Henry's closest friends; William Brereton, a gentleman of the Privy Chamber; Sir Francis Weston, another courtier; and most shockingly, George Boleyn, Anne's own brother, accused of incest with his sister. On May 2nd, 1536, Anne is summoned before the Privy Council at Greenwich. She is accused of adultery with 5 men, of plotting the king's death, of incest with her brother. The charges are preposterous. Some of the alleged encounters took place when Anne was visibly pregnant, or when the accused men were verifiably elsewhere. But facts matter little now. She is arrested and taken by barge to the Tower of London, entering through the same water gate she had passed through in triumph for her coronation just 3 years earlier. Anne is held in the same apartments she occupied before her coronation. The symbolism is deliberate and cruel. She is not placed in a dungeon, but in royal quarters, as befits a queen, but a queen who is now a prisoner. She is attended by 4 ladies chosen by Cromwell, women instructed to report every word she says. Anne understands the trap. She swings between defiance and despair, proclaiming her innocence, then breaking down in tears. The trials begin on May 12th. First, the commoners, Smeaton, Norris, Weston, Brereton, all except Smeaton maintain their innocence. All are found guilty and condemned to death. On May 15th, Anne herself faces trial in the Great Hall of the Tower. She is judged by a jury of 26 peers, including her own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, who presides. Anne defends herself with intelligence and dignity. She addresses each charge systematically, pointing out contradictions and impossibilities. Witnesses who knew her testify she was constantly attended by ladies-in-waiting, making secret liaisons virtually impossible. But the verdict is predetermined. Each peer must pronounce his judgment individually. One by one, they declare, guilty. George Boleyn's trial is equally farcical. The charge of incest is based largely on Anne once spending time alone with her brother, hardly remarkable for siblings, and on testimony from George's own wife, who hated him. George defends himself brilliantly, but it makes no difference. He too is condemned to death. While Anne awaits execution, Henry is openly courting Jane Seymour. He dines with her, gives her gifts, plans their wedding. The day after Anne's trial, he obtains a special dispensation allowing him to marry Jane immediately after Anne's death. The indecent haste reveals everything about Henry's priorities. On May 17th, the 5 men are executed on Tower Hill. Norris, Weston, Brereton, and George Boleyn are beheaded. Mark Smeaton, as a commoner, is hanged. Before his death, George Boleyn gives a speech acknowledging generic sins but maintaining innocence of the specific charges. His words are carefully chosen. Any direct accusation of injustice would endanger the rest of his family. Anne has 2 more days to live. She spends them in prayer and preparation. She writes to her father, begging him to care for her household servants after her death. She asks that her debts be paid. She maintains her innocence but accepts her fate with a dignity that impresses even her enemies. William Kingston, Constable of the Tower, reports her strange mood swings, defiant one moment, laughing the next, then weeping. Perhaps shock, perhaps the terrible absurdity of her situation. At Henry's order, Anne will not face the traditional English method of execution for women, burning at the stake, nor even the axe. Instead, he has sent to Calais for an expert swordsman, the executioner of Saint-Omer, who kills with a single stroke of a sword. It is presented as a mercy, perhaps Henry's final gift to the woman he once loved obsessively, or perhaps just a desire for efficiency to end this chapter cleanly and move on to Jane. May 19th, 1536, 8 o'clock in the morning, Anne is brought to the scaffold on Tower Green. Only a small crowd has been allowed to witness this royal execution, about 1,000 people, carefully selected. The public execution ground on Tower Hill would have drawn tens of thousands, but Henry wants this done with minimal spectacle. Anne mounts the scaffold. She wears a gray damask gown trimmed with fur, a red kirtle beneath, red being the color of martyrdom. Her hair is pulled up under a white coif, her neck exposed. Her ladies-in-waiting weep openly, but Anne is composed. She addresses the small crowd. Her words are carefully chosen. To directly proclaim her innocence would be seen as defiance, potentially endangering Elizabeth's future. To confess would stain her honor forever. So she threads the needle. Good Christian people, I am come hither to die according to law, for by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I come here only to die, and thus to yield myself humbly to the will of the King, my Lord. And if in my life I did ever offend the King's grace, surely with my death I do now atone. She removes her headdress herself, her ladies tying a blindfold over her eyes. Accounts differ on her final words. Some say she prayed, "O Lord, have mercy on me. To God I commend my soul. To Jesus Christ I commend my soul. Lord Jesus, receive my soul." Others report she kept repeating, "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul," perhaps to keep her neck steady, perhaps from terror, perhaps from faith. The French executioner is a professional. He has hidden his sword in the straw, not wanting Anne to see it and flinch. He calls out, "Bring me the sword," as a distraction. As Anne turns her head toward his voice, he draws the blade and strikes, one clean blow. Witnesses report Anne's lips were still moving in prayer, even after her head was separated from her body. A phenomenon observed in other beheadings, possibly muscle reflex, possibly something we cannot explain. Anne Boleyn, Queen of England for 1,000 days, is dead at 35 years old. Her body and head are placed in an arrow chest. No one had prepared a proper coffin, and buried in an unmarked grave in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the tower walls. There is no funeral, no monument, no official mourning period. The next day, the very next day, Henry VIII becomes formally betrothed to Jane Seymour. They marry on May 30th, just 11 days after Anne's execution. Henry wears white, the color of mourning, but for whom? Certainly not for Anne, whom he has already erased from history. Elizabeth, not yet 3 years old, is declared a bastard. Her household is reduced. Her title of princess is stripped away. She becomes simply the Lady Elizabeth. For years, she will not understand why her father does not visit her, why her mother's name is never spoken. Later, as queen, she will almost never mention Anne Boleyn, the mother who cost her legitimacy, who gave her life and then abandoned her to political necessity. Was Anne Boleyn guilty? Modern historians universally agree. Absolutely not. The charges were fabricated, the evidence contradictory, the trials show trials. But why? Why such an elaborate construction of guilt? Simple annulment would have been legally easier and politically cleaner. The answer lies in Henry's psychology. An annulment would make him wrong. Wrong to defy the Pope. Wrong to break from Rome. Wrong to discard Catherine. But if Anne was a treacherous adulteress, then Henry was the victim, deceived by a wicked woman. 6 men died to preserve Henry's ego and clear the path for Jane Seymour. Yet Anne's legacy survived her death. She had promoted religious reform, protected Protestant scholars, supported the translation of the Bible into English. These seeds would flower during her daughter's reign. Elizabeth I would rule for 45 years, presiding over England's golden age. Everything Henry wanted, a strong ruler, a stable succession, a powerful England, he received through the daughter of the woman he murdered. In 1876, during renovations at the Tower of London, Anne's remains were identified and reburied properly. A marble marker now notes her grave in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, alongside Catherine Howard and Lady Jane Grey, other queens and would-be queens who met violent ends. The inscription is simple. Anne Boleyn died 1536. Today, 500,000 people visit the Tower of London each year. They walk on Tower Green where Anne died. They see the crown jewels she once wore. They learn her story, and they ask the eternal question, how could this happen? How could a king who once wrote love poetry to a woman order her beheaded on fabricated charges? Anne Boleyn was not a saint. She was ambitious, sharp-tongued, politically engaged, and willing to gamble everything for power. She helped destroy Catherine of Aragon and celebrated her rival's death. She was a product of her time, playing the only game available to women in Tudor England, marriage and motherhood as paths to influence. But she was also brilliant, educated, and brave. She changed the course of English history. She gave birth to one of England's greatest monarchs. She promoted religious reform at great personal risk. And she died with dignity, betrayed by the man who had once promised her the world. The love affair between Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn did indeed cost a queen her head. But it also cost England its relationship with Rome, sparked the English Reformation, and set the stage for the Elizabethan age. History is rarely written by love alone, but by the catastrophic collision of desire, power, and politics. Anne Boleyn was 35 years old when she died. She had been Queen of England for just 1,000 days. But her echo, her hidden tale, reverberates through 5 centuries, reminding us that behind every crown lies a human story of ambition, love, betrayal, and mortality. Thank you for watching this episode of Echoes of Hidden Tales. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Tudor history, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with fellow history lovers. Join us next time as we uncover another scandal, another betrayal, another hidden tale from the shadows of history.